Thanks. I want to start by saying that this evening is what Tipu would call an existential experience. We're talking about somebody who was so alive that it's difficult to believe he is not living among us, although he's not dead for us. I've got a vast span, and I will request Bina to stop me so I know when, a minute before I'm supposed to end, so I know where to stop. It all started off with an encounter at Wright's Bar. Wright's Bar was a seedy little bar at the LSE. It was actually a breakfast place. And it's where Tipu and I first saw Imran Khan, because his sister, Rubina, was sitting with us. She was at the LSE. And this gawky stranger had come from Oxford, where he was playing cricket. That was about the time of my first meeting with Tipu. It was, I think, a Thursday. I remember that clearly, in 1970. And Tipu was going to college in the south of London, and he was going to transfer to the LSE. It was quite, London School of Economics. It's quite obvious that Tipu was not an ordinary person. Remember, a transfer from a South London college to the London School of Economics is not a walkover. It was obvious that he'd come there to be stationed and then to move. There are many episodes at the LSE. I could speak about Tipu and theatre, where I first directed him, I think all those 53 years, 52 years ago, in the Bald Soprano or the Bald Prima Donna by Eugene Ionesco. Theatre of the Absurd. It wasn't Tipu's first play. He had done an Ionesco play prior to that. And he loved Ionesco. This is the first time I met somebody who loved Ionesco. How could somebody love the theatre of the absurd when you were only 19 years old in London? So what happened subsequently was that Tipu and I started working together. He was starring in one of the 4 roles in the quartet in the Bald Soprano at the LSE, in the LSE Drama Festival. And Tipu was also my assistant director. So we would start every rehearsal with half an hour of exercise for the actors, which Tipu was very, very enthusiastic about. Because Tipu and I had jointly conceptualized a marionette movement in the Bald Soprano. And therefore, for half an hour prior to rehearsal, all the cast of 4 people would be doing, he was Mr. Martin. He was doing the exercise along with them, and he was taking the rest of them along. In 1971, nobody in London did exercises except in professional or in experimental theatre. That's where I learnt that Tipu was very much in love with experimental theatre, because he had already done theatre in Lahore. He was already working on his Shakespearean adaptations, which he could speak of extempore in his mind. He could speak about PPP, Macbeth. He could speak about suitably transported Hamlet, and all within the Pakistani political medium. But specifically, there were 2 scars on Tipu's life even then. One was the loss of Dhaka in his life. And the second one was, I think, his mother's passing away. These were 2 things that influenced him very deeply. Now, I'll tell you 2 incidents from London and then move on to a further phase in Tipu's life. The first one was That was a Thursday. And Tipu and I were completely obsessed after meeting each other for the first time. We knew we were going to be great friends. So he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to see some friends at the Car Saunders complex." And they're at the LSE. The Car Saunders was the LSE halls of residence. "Why don't you come along with me?" He said, "Well, I'm reading this." Now, this is my first exposure. It was T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. And I said, "Tipu, what is it like?" And then he gave two or three of his favorite lines from the opening of T.S. Eliot. "Let us go then, you and I, where the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized on the table." Tipu loved etherization. On a table, it was the blood in the sunset. And then, of course, he would smile and say, "In the rooms, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo." So Tipu and I went to Car Saunders. At Car Saunders, we went to a group of friends who were enthusiastic about youth and poetry. And Tipu, of course, was a poet. So Tipu began readings from the Wasteland, from T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. That was Thursday evening. I lived in South Kensington, so I left an hour later. When I returned to visit these friends on Tuesday at 2 p.m., Tipu was still reading from the Wasteland to the same group of people. Everyone was enthralled. Lectures had been skipped at the LSE. That was Tipu, the talking poet, the poet of the people, the person who could create Shakespearean plays verbally, rather like some people read Marsyas of Mir and East in their mind.
So,
next.
My alarm did go off, and I didn't interrupt you because you were in, but so if you could talk a little bit about Bidshah, like 2 minutes.
That was Tipu in London.
Thank you.
Then there was Tipu in Karachi. Sorry, there's one closing episode in London. This is the last time to say it, and I'll say it. There was a young man from India who fancied he was on his father's side from the Nizam of Hyderabad's family, and on his mother's side from the Maharani of Baroda. These were, of course, fictional ancestors. But Tipu's close friend Butt and I went to this house in South Croydon for dinner. We had been promised Goan fish curry because the boy himself was from a Christian background. So we sat there, a little disappointed, as the bird's eye fish fingers came out in Goan masala. And we began to eat. At the moment we had our first bite, there was loud banging at the door. And Tipu and I and Butt looked at each other, and we looked at the host, and the host said, "Sorry, my grandmother's not too well. We keep her locked up in the attic." And then as we began to try the bird's eye fish finger, the door began to burst at the seams, and he looks and says, "I'm sorry, but you guys can't stay for dinner." So we said, "How do we leave? This door that she's banging on is the door out. It's also in the corridor, but it's the door out." So he said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave from the window." So Tipu, Butt, and I jumped out of the window. Tipu was more lithe, of course. I was way heavier then. And we fled. That was London.
Thank you. No, we will not.